All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning on March 25th, 2020, for a webinar between the Center for Business Growth and Innovation, Brown Winnick Law Firm, Advance Iowa, and the University of Northern Iowa. My name is Patrick Linsman. I'm going to be helping facilitate and moderate the session today. We're going to be kind of continuing our series, Coping with COVID-19, Creative Solutions for Your Business, as we're doing every day live at 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. on Facebook and Zoom. We're very appreciative of everyone taking the time to stop with us and learn a little bit. On the webinar today, we've got Dan Binkin, who's the Director of Advance Iowa at the University of Northern Iowa, where they're working with clients and companies on succession planning, strategic planning, and continuing to think about how they can work through this emergency. And from Brown Winnick, we are joined by Danielle. She's actively involved in the firm's employment practice group. That includes counseling employers in human resource policies and procedures, unlawful discrimination, harassment, retaliation, FMLA, Iowa state and federal wage and hour issues, reduction in forces, restrictive covenants such as non-competes, non-solicitation agreements, and confidentiality agreements, discipline and determination issues, and drug testing and policies. She conducts management training and personnel issues, and has served as an investigator for clients in all types of different employment issues. And she's appeared in front of numerous agencies and works with them a lot on such as Iowa Workforce Development and the Iowa Civil Rights Commission, as well as state and federal courts on their behalf. So we are very appreciative of her time today. She's a frequent speaker on employment-related issues for clients, and has written some articles on that too. So hopefully that was a quick introduction. Danielle got a little bit more love than Dan, but that's because I know Dan, and so he can tell you a little bit about himself. With that, throughout the webinar, if you have questions, please enter them into the Q&A box or into the chat, and we'll make sure that the presenters can address those. And if you're watching on Facebook, feel free to like, comment, or share any questions you have there, and we'll make sure that we can get those to our presenters as well. All right, Dan, take it away.
Thanks, Patrick. Thanks for the intros here. First off, our thanks from everyone here at UNI to Danielle Smid and Brown Winnick for joining us today. So greatly appreciate your time, Danielle. I know this is probably all of a sudden you're probably an extremely popular person there at your firm. You're focused on employment law and sadly all the issues surrounding COVID related to unemployment now that you're dealing with. And so that's why we brought you in today, to hopefully dispel some myths, maybe talk a little bit about some of the bigger challenges and frequently asked questions that you're getting, and talk through some of that this morning. So with that, Danielle, maybe we could get right into it and just talk maybe quickly first about what you're seeing as far as the biggest common issues for smaller companies.
Sure, absolutely. And I'm excited to be here and be able to talk through some of these issues with everyone. Definitely the biggest thing we're seeing with smaller companies is, the question regarding what do we do if our business or our finances require us to either shut the doors or lay some of our workforce off. How do we handle that, and where do we go from there? And quite honestly, what are our options as a smaller business or smaller employer?
Perfect. And so what are some of those options, at least from your expertise on the unemployment side? So we've cut our spending as much as we can, and now we're at the point where we maybe have to think about how do we let an employee or two go to save the ship, so to speak? What kinds of things are we looking at for options there, Danielle?
Well, there are some options out there. Of course, laying employees off, either temporarily or permanently terminations. Those are options. Unpaid leave, also options. Paid leave, any of those things, could apply in these situations. Most employers, what we're seeing is most employers, obviously they want to keep their doors open and they want to continue business, but they also have great concern for their employees. And so they're certainly trying to do what's best for their employees. In regard to a layoff, temporarily, layoff, we have to let some of our employees go at this point because we can't continue to pay everyone when our business has taken a real slowdown based on the impact of COVID-19. The benefit that the state of Iowa is giving us right now as employers is they have opened up unemployment benefits. So if an employee is laid off during this and related to the COVID-19, what I'll call a crisis right now, those employees will be entitled to unemployment benefits from the state of Iowa. The state of Iowa has basically waived any fact-finding interviews or other investigation into those claims to allow for benefits to take effect as soon as possible. They also have waived any penalty or charge against the employer so long as that layoff or the reduction in hours or whatever it may be is related to the COVID-19 issue right now.
And so that, I'm guessing, is a fairly, a lot of things are going to fit into that bucket as far as how we could define things to make them fit for rationale being COVID-19 and business slowdowns. And so the types of premium and increases and penalties that they would have seen before, they're gonna waive those on. Have they set a time frame or anything like that for this, or is it still pretty gray with time frames?
It really is still gray with time frames. I think it's gonna stay open as long as it's needed. The biggest issue, honestly, that I was hearing as of last night was that the website is struggling to keep up with all the claims, and so there may be a little bit of a slowdown just in getting your claim in. Hopefully, I know that the governor's office is aware of that, as is IWD, and so they are working to do their best to fix that as soon as possible. So I guess my best advice would be patient at this point. You will get there. It's just a little bit of a slow process, I think, at this point. As far as being, fairly broad on things that relate to COVID, I agree with you. I think things like an employee who's traveled abroad or internationally, who is quarantined either, because of their employer mandating it or self-quarantined and they're unable to work and not getting paid. Things like that, I think, are going to qualify at this point.
Okay. And so just from a standpoint of talking through one thing with maybe a little bit of a case study. So if myself and my family went to Mexico for spring break, we got back, I came back to work, and everybody at work is giving me a dirty look like you shouldn't be here, whatever it might be. So I think, can you kind of walk me through as an employee, then you need to, if you're doing that quarantine process, you qualify for unemployment only after you've kind of burned through the vacation time that your employer grants you and those kinds of things. How does that work?
Yeah, so if you're quarantined and unable, well, first of all, most employers at this point are asking their employees, not all, but most are asking their employees who have traveled to places like Mexico or internationally. Some are asking employees who have traveled to various states who have a high confirmed case, amount of COVID-19, to self-report that and to self-quarantine, which means stay home for 14 days. Myself and my family we're in that category, and so
okay.
we're all hanging out together at home while I'm trying to work, which always makes things interesting. But what the state is saying is, in that situation, if you're an employee in that situation, talk to your employer about the possibility of working from home and see if that is, telecommuting, or if that is a possibility. That should be the first option. If
Okay.
that's not possible, then talk to your employer about paid time off, meaning, are you eligible for paid time off, or is the employee eligible for paid time off, sick leave, vacation time, PTO, anything like that. If paid time off is also not available, then you're likely going to be eligible for unemployment benefits at that point.
Okay. A couple other things. How about how much, is there a rule of thumb or a percentage that so the employee is going to say, well, I'm making, I don't know, $800 a week right now. What's that going to look like with my unemployment check? Because I know that that's typically less. Is there a way to kind of give a ballpark for those employees, or is that really tough to do?
It is tough to do, and what your unemployment payment will be based on your actual wages, and so all of that will need to be reported on the claim form, and they will make the determination just like they have, before this COVID-19 crisis.
Yep.
That hasn't really changed as far as calculations go, and so it's the same number of weeks. It's some states I've seen recently are increasing the number of weeks that employees would be eligible for unemployment. I haven't seen that yet in Iowa. It may
Still 6
come.
months or half a year of pay? Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's 26 weeks, I think,
Okay.
is what, just off the top of my head.
I think
and so, yeah, that has not changed. That number of weeks so far has not changed.
okay. And as far as how about like a minimum amount of weekly pay? Do you know how part-time someone can be and still be able to file? Sometimes those employees who are working the least amount for somebody maybe are the first ones that are asked to go on.
Absolutely. Yeah, and so what the state is saying is, if you have any reduction in hours, if you're part-time and you're no longer able to work or get paid, or if you're full-time and they move you to part-time, those employees should also file for unemployment. Again, that determination is going to be based on their situation and, what their wages were before. It's less based on number of hours and more based on weekly wages that they were seeing prior to the change.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit too about the employer themselves or theirselves, if it's some sort of partnership structure, as far as, how do they protect themselves too in this case, or look at maybe, maybe it's a pretty small business. They have 2 or 3 employees or just themselves or whatever it might be. How are they impacted? How are they able to potentially benefit?
Well, I mean, the benefit to employers, and especially small employers at this point, with the changes to the unemployment law, really is the fact that they're not going to get pinged for this. So if they have 3 employees and those 3 employees file for unemployment, it's not going to affect the employers what they're charged next year, what their insurance or tax will be the following year. So that will just stay steady. Those charges have been waived by the state of Iowa. My best advice at this point for small employers is, you've really got to do what you can do to either keep it running or shut it down for a period of time that would allow you to restart, hopefully, once this thing passes. We're seeing a lot of this, quite honestly, with some of the dental offices around the state are having to shut down because they have, if you have one dentist, a handful of staff members, they've been directed to only treat emergency cases based on the possible risk of infection, obviously. And so a lot of them are having to shut their doors right now. And those employees, those assistants and those hygienists that can't continue to do their job, those individuals are going for unemployment and receiving it.
Right. So industries that typically maybe you didn't see, you know, a
Yeah,
lot of cyclicalness and oh boy, all of a
yeah,
sudden unemployment is something they never had to deal with before, right? Okay.
right.
Up,
I mean,
up.
we're obviously seeing it in the service industries as well, where the restaurants aren't allowed to fully operate at this point. A lot of them are doing carry out, obviously, and that's I think been helpful. But you don't need necessarily a full staff while you're doing carry out versus full kitchen, dining room
Right.
open. So we're seeing a lot in that industry as well.
How about from the standpoint of can the owner of the business file for unemployment for him or herself?
So that's a little bit gray, but yeah, I mean, before typically an owner unemployment would not be available to owners. But what we're seeing is owners, like everybody, like every other employee, should at this point go ahead and file, and they will make that determination. But if an owner of a business, let's say for example, we've got a one-person LLC who's doing contract work for various other businesses, and those businesses basically say, no, we can't use you anymore because we've slowed down so much. If I were that one person LLC, I'd be filing just to see if I can get it. I can't guarantee that it will happen, but I think right now there is a possibility that they will open that up for owners as well.
Okay. How about, and I should mention too here before we wrap up, of course, that we're live right now and we're able to take questions either through the Q&A on our Zoom platform or through our Facebook channels. So if you have specific questions, now's maybe your opportunity to get a little free advice and that kind of thing. Please send those in. Danielle is more than happy to help out with those as she can. How about if we go back to the employee side of it? A lot of times, an employee, like let's take a dental hygienist for example. When you're laid off, I think there's requirements and expectations that you're looking for a new position and a new job. And although I know there are a couple of, there's a select few employers who are doing hiring right now, just because of the COVID situation has made their business much more busy. I know Walmart, Amazon, places like that have been putting out a lot of information that they are hiring. But if you're a dental hygienist, your skill set doesn't really parlay itself to maybe that kind of work. How much active job seeking are you required to do at a time when maybe, I know that the reports are saying that that filing claims are blowing up, so to speak. And so how much of that do you have to do as an employee?
What they're saying right now is that they are also waiving that requirement to go out there and search for jobs. I mean, despite the fact that a lot of that is done electronically versus going and knocking on businesses' doors anymore. But like you said, there's a lot of businesses out there that tend to be more on the letting people go or laying off versus hiring. There are some out there that are hiring, but what Iowa Workforce Development is saying is that at this point they're waiving that requirement if it's related to the COVID-19 situation.
Okay, great. Okay. And just in the few minutes that we have left, Danielle, maybe first if you could address any myths or misconceptions about unemployment that you've gotten in what I would call the normal world that are maybe heightened now, or things that you would want to dispel to employers out there. If you could maybe first touch on anything like that.
Sure. So the biggest thing one of the biggest confusions that we're seeing is employees that do have available PTO or paid time off, whether it's in form of PTO or sick leave or anything like that. What Iowa Workforce is saying is that needs to be used first. It doesn't mean that you can't go ahead and file a claim, but that paid time will have to be reported on that claim. So unfortunately or fortunately, whatever, whether you're the employer or the employer, that PTO will need to, the way they're handling the claims right now will need to be used first.
Okay. All right. So that's kind of one of the big ones, it sounds like.
Yeah.
How about now going forward, what are folks in your industry or within this area kind of looking for from, potentially any of the new laws passed last night? I know a lot of that was stimulus related and whatnot, but are there things that you're watching for that you think might affect how busy you're going to be as far as laws that might be passed, anything like that?
I do think both state and federal governments are very consistently looking for ways to help our employers and help our employees both in this situation. One of the big things that we've been talking about with clients and dealing with clients, in addition to the change in the unemployment, is this new federal Families First Coronavirus Response Act. And what that does is that provides additional leave for employees who are off for various reasons due to COVID-19. And it affects employers who are under 500. And so, it does apply to, at this point, small businesses, despite the fact that the FMLA, without this emergency FMLA, there was a numbers requirement there. Now, what they're saying is that employers that have less than 50 employees who can show that abiding by this act and paying this additional leave, if it would, essentially put them in jeopardy of having to close their business, they will likely be exempt from this. And so that's one thing to keep in mind. And if employers want to talk through that and talk through situations, we're certainly available to do that, because what we were trying to figure out, honestly, is whether there was going to be an application process to the Secretary of Labor for that, because it is the Secretary of Labor who can make that exemption. And what we're seeing, now this isn't set in stone because we haven't received a lot of guidance yet, we're still waiting for more, but what we're seeing is I don't think that will be an application process, because as you can imagine, I'm sure it would be just mass chaos.
Yeah.
But what it may be is these smaller employers who believe that they would, in good faith, fit within this exemption, need to have a good faith belief and valid belief that that's the case, and that they can then operate as if they're exempted, with the mindset that if they ever get audited or have to prove that up, they should be able to do that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, there's so many different things to think about here. We have one question on the Zoom platform. I don't know if you can see that or not, Danielle, but you open up the Q&A section at the bottom. You might have to maximize your screen, but
yep, I got it. All right, so the question is, we had to reduce salaries, not hours. We don't want to let anyone go. We want to maintain medical insurance for our staff. It affects 44 employees. Are our employees eligible due to 40% reduction in salary, not hours, though? I'm assuming this is asking about eligibility for unemployment benefits.
Right.
And I would say, yeah, because typically what they base unemployment on is wages. And so I would tell those employees to go ahead and file and answer the questions on the claim. And I think it's very, very possible that they will receive unemployment for that portion of their salary that's been reduced.
Okay.
Now, not guaranteeing, but I think that is a possibility. And and they should indicate also that it is, of course, based on the current situation.
Right. Okay. Okay, great. So it all comes down to salary or wages and not really hours necessarily. And now it looks like there's a follow-up question here. how does PTO fit into that?
So same thing. So arguably, what we're hearing is that they do need to use PTO. So, gosh, I don't know how that would all work. They may have to disclose that they have available PTO, and that would somehow maybe detract from what they would receive from unemployment. I'm not positive on how that would apply since their hours aren't down. It's harder to track PTO. I mean, with just, with a reduction in salary versus a reduction in the hours.
Sure.
So I'm not positive on that one.
Okay. How about, shoot, I just forgot what I was going to ask you. Shoot, it was related to PTO. Oh, I know. What if an employer has a fairly large bucket of PTO out there as a liability to their staff? Now we're faced with the headwind of COVID and its effect on the business, and business is down 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever percent. I maybe as the owner can no longer afford to pay out that PTO. Is that how does that come into play for the employee who is told they need to use their PTO first, and the employer is saying, I wish I could pay you, but I can't, that kind of a thing. Wow. Can you talk through that at all?
Well, sure. I mean, my best assumption, because
Yep.
this one is, again, set out in stone or black and white, but in that situation, what I would argue is that in that situation, PTO isn't available because the employer, quite honestly, has indicated that it can't pay it out. Financially, it's not available at this point. So, so arguably, employee is off for, whether it's on unpaid leave or a layoff or anything like that, without the ability to use that PTO. So it should not offset. That would be my argument.
Okay. So it might be there on paper, but it might not be there from the standpoint of liquid cash flow that the owner has access to make something happen
Right.
due to the fact that revenues have been slashed or whatever it might be. Okay. Well, so our objective with these is to keep them short and direct and answer a few basic questions. Our next webinar coming up at 2:00 today is going to focus on things you can do to be creative with your workforce now that maybe your employees don't have childcare. How do you ensure that the work gets done? We've got a lot of folks that want to.
Sounded like Dan maybe had a few technical difficulties there. At least it sounded like that on my end. So he went mute real quick. We're looking, as Dan was talking about this afternoon, looking to be flexible and productive with your employee base, and that's going to be with Phil Jones from Rata Manufacturing up in Waverly, Iowa. We're going to be doing these every day this week, 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. Live, both on Zoom and the CBGI and Advanced Iowa Facebook pages. They are recorded, and the recording will be available later today that you can come back and watch. Daniel, thank you very much for your help today. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Any final thoughts before we close out on this whole crisis?
No, I mean, honestly, if, feel free to reach out if people or employers or, continue to have questions. But, my best advice is hang in there. We're going to get through this together. The government is doing their best, I believe, to try to help everybody through this. So hang in there and, continue to do what you can do to make it through.
Awesome. And what is the best way for people to reach out?
Sure. Either email is probably the best way. I don't know if you can post that, or if you want me just to say it. Or, you know, I am home quarantined as well, but I am working via cell phone and computer. So, Patrick, how do you want me to get my information out?
Yeah, we can include it in into the description of the recording, and if you just want to give it live quick for people watching live, and then we'll go from there.
Perfect. So my email address is Danielle, DANIELLE .SMID SMID at Brown is in the color Winnick WINICK Brown and Winnick, all one word, .com. And my cell phone number is 515-669-7165.
All right. Well, thank you again very much for being with us. Thank you everyone who watched live on Zoom and on Facebook. We will hopefully we'll be back later today with another topic for you as we continue on our series with coping with COVID-19, creative solutions for your business. Take care, stay safe, and we will talk to you again soon.
Thank you.